There are stories small towns never forget. Some are whispered over back fences, others buried in archives no one dares open. But every so often, something breaks through the quiet. Something too strange, too raw, too wrong to ignore. This is one of those stories. If you're into slow-burning thrillers with grit, heart, and a punch to the gut, stick around. Hit that like button, maybe subscribe. No gimmicks. Just real stories that stick with you long after credits roll. Now let's begin. The town of Pine Bend wasn't the kind of place that made the news. It didn't want to be. Population just shy of 6,000. A single high school. The grocery store closed at 7. The kind of town where folks still left their keys in the ignition. And if your dog ran off, someone brought it back with a bag of beef jerky clipped to the collar. But on the morning of September 14th, all of that changed. It started at the playground. The wind had a bite that morning. The kind of chill that hinted winter might come early. Deputy Claire Rourke, 36, divorced, no kids, pulled into Maple Creek Park in her dusty patrol SUV with a steaming cup of coffee balanced between her knees. She wasn't expecting anything beyond chasing off a few loitering teenagers or a drunk asleep under the pavilion. What she got instead was silence. And then the dog froze. Milo, the department's only K9, half Belgian Malinois, half trouble, had been restless all morning, fidgety, whining in the back seat. She thought he needed to stretch, so she brought him along. But now he stood rigid at the base of the slide, the old spiral one, wrapped like a rusted corkscrew at the edge of the wood chips. His hackles were raised, his head tilted. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared. Claire stepped out, boots crunching in the frost-stiffened grass. "Milo," she called. Nothing. The air felt thick. Still, like holding your breath underwater. The dog's gaze didn't shift. Claire followed it. Halfway up the slide, something caught her eye. A strip of fabric fluttering. Red. Faded. It was snagged on the jagged corners of the rusted metal. She climbed the steps slowly, one hand on her holster. The closer she got, the worse it got. The red wasn't just fabric. It was soaked. Blood. Milo let out a low whine, barely a whisper. Then, without warning, he lunged, paws kicking up mulch, nose to the dirt at the foot of the slide. Digging. Frantic. It was the kind of digging no training prepared for. Claire radioed at him before she even knew what she was saying. Possible 10 to 54. Send backup. Scene secured at Maple Creek Park. K9 alerting. 10 minutes later, the town's coroner and Sheriff Don Keller stood beside her, watching as Milo unearthed something that would flip the stomachs of even the most seasoned officers. A child sneaker, size maybe 3 or 4, still laced, still dirty, still holding something. Bone, tiny, human. 15 miles away in a squat, peeling one-story house nestled behind a row of dormant cottonwoods, Caleb Vance woke up gasping. Sweat soaked through the collar of his work shirt. He didn't remember falling asleep. The whiskey bottle on the coffee table still had a sliver left. He blinked against the morning sun. And then he heard it. Sirens. Faint, but close enough to find his bones. He rubbed his face with both hands, gritty with stubble and ash. The TV was still playing static. That damn power line must have gone again. He stumbled to the window, flashing red and blue. He froze. Maple Creek Park. He could see the slide from here, or he used to, back before the trees overgrew the back lot. He hadn't been there in years. Not since. No. He pushed the thought down, deep, where it always went, where it had to stay. His fingers trembled as he reached for the whiskey. By noon, Pine Bend's unofficial grapevine had exploded. Facebook groups, gas station chatter, old ladies clutching rosaries at the diner, a child's shoe, human remains, the slide. It was Claire's worst day in uniform, and it was only getting started. She sat in the station's small interview room, stone-faced, watching the forensic team bag and label each fragment of evidence. Milo sat by her feet, still alert, still shaking. Sheriff Keller entered, jaw tight, eyes red-rimmed. "You want the good news or the bad news?" he asked. "Bad," Claire said. "They found more." Her heart dropped. More what? Bones. Scattered. Shallow grave. He paused. Old. At least a decade, maybe more. No soft tissue left. She closed her eyes, exhaled. The good news? Keller hesitated. You were right to trust the dog. She laughed, dry and bitter. That's not good news. That's basic protocol. Still, he said and paused. Claire, you're not going to like where this is heading. She looked up. Whoever buried those remains, he said, they wanted them found. And not just found. Now. That night, the town felt different. A tension in the air, like everything was leaning forward, listening. Claire sat at her kitchen table with a glass of water she hadn't touched and a plate of food going cold. The file folder on the table held one photograph. Just one. The sneaker. And inside it, wrapped in what looked like an old grocery bag, was a note. Faded. Smudged. Written in block letters like a child's. It said, I'm still waiting. The field surrounding Pine Bend had a way of holding secrets. In summer, they whispered in soft golden waves, hiding rusted farm tools and occasional deer skull beneath their long arms. But now, in the early autumn, the corn stood dry and tall, brittle leaves rasping in the wind like the dead trying to speak. Caleb Vance stood at the edge of one such field, cigarette cupped in his calloused hand, watching the wind churn through the stalks. He hadn't meant to come here. His boots had carried him down the gravel road, past the shuttered feed store, through the back lot behind his place until the corn swallowed the sky. The sirens had long faded, but the weight of what they meant hadn't. He flicked the ash from his cigarette and stared out toward the tree line. The slide was just beyond it, buried, just like the past. Claire sat at her desk long after the station lights went dim. Her coffee was stale, and the station smelled like old printer ink and dog fur. Milo lay curled near the door, tail twitching in uneasy sleep. The note was still in evidence, but Claire had scanned a copy. She studied the jagged handwriting again and again, her brain refusing to let it settle. I'm still waiting. Waiting for what? Or worse, who? Keller had locked the site down tight. State forensics were en route, but he'd left Claire with a task, one she hated. Cold cases, child disappearances, missing persons, anything that could tie in. Claire hadn't been here long enough to remember all the town skeletons. She'd moved to Pine Bend just 6 years ago, after a rough end to her marriage in Duluth. But she knew the kind of darkness small towns carried, the unspoken history, swept under rotting floorboards and tucked behind PDA smiles. At 1:24 a.m., her screen flashed with something. Missing, Jonah Keller, age 7. Disappeared October 2011. Her heart stilled. The last name. She clicked open the file. It was thin. A single-page report with a blurry photo of a boy in a puffy red jacket. A note from Sheriff Don Keller. Then a deputy, stating the child vanished from a Maple Creek Park playground while his grandmother used the restroom. No known abductions. No signs of struggle. Case closed. Presumed runaway. Unsolved. Claire whispered the name aloud. Jonah Keller, the sheriff's son. She leaned back, mind spinning. This wasn't just a discovery. It was personal. The next morning, Claire found Keller outside the park's police tape, staring at the playground slide like it might get up and walk away. He held a thermos of black coffee that steamed in the chill. I saw the file, Claire said softly. He didn't look at her. I asked him to close it, he said. After a year, no leads, nothing solid. His mom, my ex, she couldn't take it anymore. Claire didn't push. Not yet. What's the official word on the remains? Keller sighed. Too degraded to confirm ID. But the shoe, that was his. I remember it. We bought it at Montgomery's 2 weeks before he vanished. He liked red. Claire hesitated, then asked, why didn't the dog find anything back then? Keller's jaw clenched. Because he wasn't buried there. Or at least not then. She stared at him. You're saying someone came back? He nodded once. That note was fresh. That dirt was loose. Whoever did this, they came back. Recently. And they wanted us to find it now. In a town like Pine Bend, you didn't need to say something out loud for it to echo. By that afternoon, the town was humming like a struck wire. Half-truths spilled out of mouths like liquor. Conspiracy, revenge, curses, satanic panic, that old chestnut. Claire sat with a coffee at the Junction Cafe, eyes scanning the booths. People stared, whispered. Marla Vance, Caleb's sister, slid into the booth across from her like a ghost. She looked tired, pale, worn in the way grief wears you, slow and permanent. "I heard," she said. "Everyone has." Marla stirred her tea, not drinking it. "You're looking into old cases." "Into Jonah?" Claire nodded. "My mom watched him that day. I was babysitting her dog. We both felt off. Something was wrong the whole morning." Claire leaned in. "Did you ever suspect anyone?" Marla looked up, eyes hollow. "There was this boy," she said. "Quiet, older, hung around the park sometimes. Wore this hooded coat, no matter how hot it was. Gave me the creeps." "You remember his name?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, but Caleb knew him. They ran together back then. Before what?" Marla didn't answer. Claire found Caleb fixing the fencing behind the old grain co-op where he sometimes worked odd jobs. He was lean, sun-worn, and moved like a man who'd taken more beatings than he'd thrown. His hands were always dirty, always shaking. "You gonna ask me or just stare?" he said without turning. "Depends." Claire said. "You still good with dogs?" He looked back, blinking. "What?" She nodded toward Milo in the back seat of her cruiser, watching Caleb like he recognized him. "He was barking outside your house the other night." Claire said. "You know why?" Caleb's jaw twitched. "Dogs bark. You used to hang around the playground a lot." "That true?" "I was 17. My sister worked nights. I watched your kid. We went to slide almost every day." Claire's eyes narrowed. "You ever see Jonah Keller?" Caleb met her gaze. Everyone saw Jonah. "And this kid," Claire pressed, "the one in the hoodie. Who was he?" Caleb went still, dead still. "His name was Eli," he said finally. "Eli Darrow." "You friends?" Caleb scoffed. "No, we smoke sometimes. Talked about dumb shit. He was quiet, but weird quiet. Said things that made your skin crawl." "Where is he now?" Caleb looked away. "Dead. Or gone. Either way, nobody's seen him in years." That night, Claire found herself at the public records office, blowing dust off old files. Eli Darrow had no official arrest record, no school record past 2012. Just vanished. But his name was listed once, as a witness in the Jonah Keller case. His statement was a single sentence. "I saw him go into the corn." No follow-up. No second interview. Claire felt her stomach turn. The next morning, she drove out to the cornfield behind the playground with Milo. He whined as soon as they reached the perimeter, pulling hard toward the east fence line. Claire followed, ducking under brittle stalks. The world narrowed to the sound of Milo's paws on dirt, the rustle of corn and her own breath. 20 yards in, they found a hollow, a circle of earth, recently disturbed. Claire crouched. A toy sat in the center. Plastic, faded, a little red fire truck. It was buried halfway, like a headstone. Milo whimpered and sat. Claire stared at it. Then she noticed it, carved into the side of the truck with something sharp. Eli, 2011. Pine Bend hadn't had a murder in over 15 years. Domestic violence? Sure. A bar stabbing back in 2008. But a buried child? A 10-year-old mystery clawing back to life? That was the kind of thing people thought happened elsewhere. Not here. But now the cornfields were crawling with state investigators. Camera crews were parked outside the sheriff's office, and Claire's phone didn't stop ringing for 3 straight days. Still, none of it felt real until the rain came. The soft, whispering kind that made the whole town smell like rust and regret. The toy truck had been bagged and tagged. Soil samples sent to a lab in Duluth. But Claire couldn't stop thinking about the name carved into its side. Eli. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a signature, a message, But from who? Eli Darrow had been 13 when Jonah disappeared. His mother, Renee Darrow, died of an overdose 2 years later. No siblings. No father on record. CPS took him for a while, but the file stopped cold in 2014. Claire sat at her desk, scribbling notes as the rain tapped on the windows like fingers. What kind of boy carved his name into a toy he didn't own? What kind of boy watches a child vanish, then disappears himself? And what kind of man might he have become? Across town, Caleb Vance lit his sixth cigarette of the morning with hands that wouldn't stay still. He hadn't slept, couldn't eat. Something was gnawing at him, something old and sharp, like glass swallowed years ago that had finally decided to cut its way out. Eli Darrow. The name still rang in his head, like a church bell. He remembered that summer, the way Eli watched things. Never laughed. Always wore the same jacket, even when it was 90 degrees. Said it made him invisible. And the way he talked about the cornfield. Said there were places in there. Thin places, he called them, where the ground felt hollow and voices echoed wrong. Caleb hadn't thought about him in years. He never wanted to. But now the name was everywhere. On the radio. Online. Across every booth in every diner in Pine Bend. And deep down in the place where his nightmares lived, Caleb knew something worse was coming. That evening, Claire stood in front of Renee Darrow's old house. It wasn't much more than a shell now. Rotting porch boards, vines choking the windows, a rusted tricycle abandoned in the overgrown yard. She'd gotten the address from the property records. No one's lived there since 2016. The door opened with a groan that made her teeth itch. Inside, the air was thick and moldy. Wallpaper peeled like sunburned skin. The place reeked of mildew and something else, faintly sweet and rotten. She clicked on her flashlight. In the living room, water-stained drawings still hung on the walls. Crayon scrawls. Red, black, and gray. A figure standing in the corn, eyes too large. A dog lying beside a slide, its mouth open like it was screaming. And one final drawing. Taped to fridge, edges yellowed. A child stick figure, buried in the ground. Above it, in shaky letters, "He's still down there." Claire's stomach twisted. She took a photo, then heard it. A creak upstairs. Footsteps. But she was alone. She drew her weapon slowly and climbed the steps, one hand on the rail, breath caught in her throat. At the top, nothing. An empty hallway. Except a single room at the end, door cracked open. Inside, dust motes danced in the beam of her flashlight. And in the corner, a pile of children's shoes. Small. Mismatch. All caked in dirt. She counted them. 7 pairs. Claire backed out, heart pounding. Someone had been here. Recently. Later that night. She sat across from Keller in his office. "You knew Eli," she said. "Didn't you?" He didn't answer right away. Finally, he nodded. He came by the house once, after Jonah vanished. Said he saw something. Claire leaned forward, and Keller's hands gripped the desk. Said Jonah went into the corn, just walked in, and never came back. I asked him why he didn't stop him. He said, "It wasn't my turn." Claire felt the hair rise on her neck. "What the hell does that mean?" "I didn't know," Keller whispered. "Still don't." Claire dropped the photos of the shoes on his desk. "He's still out there, Don, and he's not just trying to scare us. He's playing a game." Keller rubbed his face. "Then what's the next move?" She looked him dead in the eye. "We find Eli, or whatever's left of him." 2 days later, the call came from a shelter in Fargo. A man had come in incoherent, asking for help. Said his name was Eli. Gave a Pine Bend address that hadn't existed in years. Kept muttering something about the roots and the boy who wouldn't stay buried. Claire made the drive herself. The shelter staff led her to a back room, and there, curled on a cot, bones under paper-thin skin, was a man who looked 40 but couldn't have been more than 30. He had scars across his arms. One eye clouded white, fingernails chewed to quick. She sat beside him, quietly. "Eli?" He didn't move. "Eli, my name's Claire. I'm with Pine Bend PD. We found something in the corn, a child's remains. His head turned, slow as syrup. "They found him," he said softly. "Jonah?" Eli nodded once. Tears welled in his one good eye. "I tried to tell them," he whispered, "but it never mattered. He was just the first." Claire felt a chill run up her spine. "What do you mean, first?" Eli blinked. "There were others. Always others. One every fall. The corn takes them." "That doesn't make sense," Claire said gently. "Who takes them, Eli?" Eli looked past her, toward the window, like he saw something she couldn't. Then he said, "He lives in the roots. And he's not done." The road back from Fargo felt longer than it had going out. Claire kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the dog crate beside her. Inside, Eli Darrell lay curled like a wounded animal, knees tucked to his chest, breath shallow and rhythmic, as if even unconsciousness didn't offer him rest. Milo had pressed himself against the bars earlier. He hadn't growled, hadn't barked, just watched, a quiet stare, wary and sad, as if he recognized the same thing Claire did. This man had seen too much, and somehow he'd survived it. But the question that clawed at her all the way back to Pine Bend wasn't how he survived. It was what he saw. They kept Eli in an unused observation room at the clinic on Main, away from cameras, away from town whispers. No press, no outside access. Keller pulled strings with the state mental health office and got a 72-hour hold with no questions asked. Claire sat with him the first night. He didn't sleep, didn't speak, just stared at the ceiling as if something waited for him up there. At 2:17 a.m., he finally spoke. "Do you know what Harvest Circle is?" Claire blinked, startled. "You mean crop circles?" Eli shook his head. "No, not those tourist bullshit things. I mean the old ones. Places in the cornfields where the roots twist up, where nothing grows right, where the air changes." He paused, lips dry and cracked. "I was 8 the first time I saw one. My uncle took me out to burn trash. He told me never to step into the middle. They'll know your name if you do." That's what he said. Claire swallowed hard. "Who are they, Eli?" Eli's eyes met hers. "Hollow. Haunted. They don't have names anymore. Just hunger." Meanwhile, Caleb stood in the rain outside the Darrow house. Something about that place wouldn't leave him alone. The drawings, the shoes, the smell. He hadn't told Claire this part, hadn't told anyone, but back in 2011, just days before Jonah vanished, he and Eli had gone into the cornfield together. Not deep, just far enough for Eli to show him something. A spot where the dirt turned black and soft, where bugs wouldn't go, where Eli had whispered, "If you leave something here, it stays." Caleb had laughed back then, kicked the soda can into the circle, and watched it vanish beneath the soil like it had never existed. But now he wondered what else had been fed to that place, and what might crawl back out if it got hungry again. Sheriff Keller didn't believe in ghosts, or monsters, or ancient things in the ground that whispered through the stalks. But when he walked into the evidence room and saw the new photos, another toy, another child's drawing unearthed just outside the park, he felt something in his gut twist and harden like a tumor. The new drawing was different. This one had a face, a man drawn in thick black crayon, with something red bleeding from his eyes, a long coat, a knife, and below it, scrawled in shaking letters, "The Man from the Circle." Keller stared at it for a long time. Then he picked up the phone and called Claire. Claire met him outside the Maple Creek cornfield just before dusk. The sky was bruised, heavy with clouds. The fields rustled with wind that didn't quite feel like wind. Keller stood by the cruiser, arms crossed, face pale. "We need to go in," he said. "Don, we don't have a warrant or probable cause. We have 7 pairs of shoes, 2 child-sized bones, and a man in a psych ward whispering about things in the roots." She hesitated. Keller added, "And he drew this." He handed her a crumpled piece of paper. Pencil sketch. Crude, but unmistakable. A slide, a cornfield, and beneath it, a hand reaching up from the soil. They stepped into the corn together, flashlights low. Claire had Milo on a lead. The dog moved slowly at first, then tugged harder faster, nose low, tail rigid. He knew something was off. 20 yards in, the path curved. Something had pressed the stalks outward, a wide, circular pattern, not trampled, but flattened, perfectly round. At the center, the soil was darker, wetter. Claire crouched and touched it. Still warm. Keller knelt beside her. Feel that? She nodded, like the earth had a heartbeat. Then Milo barked, sharp and frantic. He was pawing at something buried. They dug together, hands shaking, and found another note, soaked in red, stiff with age. It read, "One every harvest. The roots remember." Claire felt cold crawl up her spine. What the hell does that mean? But Keller didn't answer. He was staring at the stalks. Someone was standing at the edge of the circle. A man, tall, hooded, coat flapping in the wind, face in shadow. Claire stood, flashlight aimed. "Police, show me your hands." The figure didn't move. Keller drew his sidearm. "I said hands." Still nothing. Claire took a step forward, then froze. The corn behind the figure swayed open like curtains, and in the space behind him were more people. Dozens. Silent. Still. Eyes catching light like glass. None of them moved. None of them spoke. Claire's voice cracked. "Don." He backed toward her, gun still raised. But the man in the hood lifted his hand, one slow, deliberate motion, and pointed downward into the soil, then whispered something neither of them could hear, and vanished. They ran, all the way back to the field's edge. Only when they burst into the open night, gasping, did Claire realize what she was clutching in her fist. A second drawing. She didn't remember picking it up. It showed the same man, and a spiral slide, and beneath it, 3 stick figures. 2 were crossed out. One still had a name beneath it. Caleb. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. Not from fear. From certainty. Something was counting down. Something ancient. And someone had just moved Caleb Vance to the top of his list. The rain had stopped by morning, but the ground still carried it. A softness underfoot, like the earth had loosened or been loosened. The kind of ground things didn't stay buried in. Claire stood outside Caleb's trailer at 6:42 a.m., her knuckles raw from knocking. The curtain twitched on the left window, then fell still. "Caleb," she called, "we need to talk." A long pause. Then the door opened, slow and deliberate. He looked like hell, shirtless, pale eyes bloodshot. A bruise bloomed purple along his jaw. His right hand was bandaged. Blood seeped through the gauze. "Didn't know you made house calls." Claire held up the sketch, the one with his name under the last uncrossed figure. "Someone's marked you," she said. "I need to know why." Caleb stared at it, unblinking, then muttered, "It's harvest week." "What does that mean?" He shook his head, laughing dryly. "Same thing it always does. That thing comes looking." "Thing? You think this is about Eli? Or some psycho out there in mask?" "Nah, this has been here longer than us. Longer than the town. Maybe longer than the corn." He rubbed his eyes. "My dad used to say the fields remember. Said if you listen close at night, the soil talks back." Claire felt a chill despite the rising sun. "Did Eli ever take you to one of the circles?" Caleb's eyes shifted. "Once." She waited. It was after funeral. "A kid from our class drowned in the lake. Eli said he didn't really die. Said he'd been traded." Claire frowned. "Traded for what?" Caleb looked away. "That's the thing about the harvest. Something always has to be taken." Back at the station, Keller met Claire with bloodshot eyes and a worn manila folder. "Got something you need to see," he said, voice raw. They stepped into the conference room. Laid out on the table were 3 case files, each from a different decade, each from Pine Bend, each marked unsolved juvenile disappearance. Claire flipped through the first, 1972. Danny Whitman, age 6, vanished walking home from church. Next, 1985. Clara Stokes, age 9, last seen riding her bike near the silo. And the third, 1998. Jude Walker, age 8, disappeared during the harvest parade. No connections. No suspects. Each one vanished in autumn, within days of the corn reaching full height. Each one occurred within a 10-mile radius of Maple Creek Park. Claire's voice was a whisper. One every harvest. Keller nodded. Until Jonah. Claire blinked. But there's been no disappearances since him. That breaks the pattern. Maybe, Keller said. Or maybe Jonah wasn't enough. By dusk, Claire returned to the corn. This time, alone. No backup. No dog. No radio. She needed to hear it. Feel it. The wind had calmed. The stalk stood still as sentries. She walked 50 yards in. Then 75. Then she stopped. Because it wasn't wind she heard. It was whispering. Low. Indistinct. Like dozens of voices murmuring just beneath the soil. Her breath caught. The circle was ahead. Black dirt. Footprints. New ones. Scattered around it. She knelt. Fingers brushing the soft earth. Then a sound behind her. A footstep. Slow. Deliberate. She stood. Gun drawn. But no one was there. Only corn. Then she saw it. A child. Standing at the edge of the circle. Face pale. Eyes vacant. Wearing a red jacket. Jonah? The boy didn't speak. Didn't blink. Claire took a slow step forward. Are you? The boy opened his mouth. But instead of words, soil spilled out. Dry. Coarse. Endless. Claire staggered back. The child fell forward, collapsing into the earth like it had always belonged to him. Gone. As if he'd never been. Back at the clinic, Eli screamed awake just past midnight. Sweat drenched his cot. He clutched his chest like it was breaking open. The nurse tried to calm him, but he kept repeating one phrase, over and over. It's his turn. It's his turn. It's his turn. At 4:13 a.m., Claire pounded on Caleb's door again. No answer. She circled to the back. The kitchen window was open. Inside, a chair knocked over. Whiskey spilled across the counter. The screen door flapping. She called his name. Nothing. In the backyard, muddy prints led through the weeds. Claire followed, down a slope, into the trees. And there, the field again. The same path. The same rustle. Only this time, something called to her. A voice not heard, but felt. And ahead, at the edge of the circle, Caleb knelt in the dirt, hands behind his back, blood dripping from his palms. And across from him, watching in silence, stood the man in the hood. Claire raised her weapon. Don't move. Neither did. Caleb turned his head, eyes distant. It's okay, he said. No, it's not. The hooded man stepped forward. Claire's light caught his face. What she saw made her knees weaken. It was Eli, but not the one in the clinic. Younger, whole, unscarred. He smiled softly. Some parts of us don't stay, he said. Some parts come back, especially the broken ones. He gestured to the circle. He chose this. He remembered. Caleb looked up. Tears streaked his face. I saw what I did, he said. I let it happen. I looked away, just like everyone else. Claire's voice broke. You didn't bury Jonah. No, Caleb said, but I buried the truth. The soil beneath him began to sink, collapse inward, like a mouth opening. Claire lunged, grabbed his wrist. Don't. But he looked at her, not afraid. Someone has to go. And then he let go, vanished into the earth, swallowed without sound. The hooded figure stepped back into the corn. Gone. She returned to the station before sunrise. Clothes soaked, mind shattered. She walked straight to Keller's office, dropped the sketch on his desk. Caleb's name had been crossed out. Another harvest. Paid. Claire looked at the sheriff, voice hollow. It's over. Keller stared at her. Until next time. In the clinic, Eli awoke for the final time, sat up, smiled faintly. I think it stopped, he said, then lay back, and died. Fall settled deep into Pine Bend like a stain that wouldn't wash out. The corn turned brittle, then black, curling in on itself as the harvest waned. Farmers worked under halogen lights, silent and fast, like they wanted the fields cut before anything else could crawl out. In town, they said things had quieted. No new disappearances. No new drawings. No new whispers from the dirt. But Claire knew the quiet was a lie. It always was. They held a memorial for Caleb Vance in a patch of wind-burned grass behind the church. No casket, no body, just a framed photo, one of the few where he smiled. Claire stood in the back, coat zipped, hands buried in her pockets. Milo lay at her feet, head on his paws, eyes locked on the horizon. Marla Vance spoke. Her voice was steady until the last sentence, when it cracked like old paint. He always thought he was broken, she said. But maybe what broke him saved the rest of us. That night, Claire sat alone in her kitchen, staring at the drawing, the last one Eli ever made, that she hadn't shown anyone. It showed the same slide, the same spiral. But now the roots reached out from under it, curling like fingers toward the sky. In the center was a name. Not Caleb, not Jonah, not even Eli. It was hers. Claire. Keller handed in his retirement papers 2 days later. He didn't give a reason, didn't say goodbye, just left a single line typed into his resignation letter. There are some ghosts a badge can't touch. The interim chief was from Duluth, didn't believe in ghosts, or root circles, or children who drowned in dirt. Claire didn't argue. She just went quiet, started sleeping in her living room with the TV on, never turned off her porch light. And every few nights, she walked the playground slide with Milo, just to sit and watch. One night, as the first snow began to fall, she noticed something new. Not a toy, not a shoe, just a line of footprints. Small, bare, leading out of the corn. They ended near the slide, but there was nothing waiting there, just a patch of black earth, still warm. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, a single Polaroid, a spiral slide, empty, and below it, a shadow, long human-shaped, facing the woods, written on the back in red ink. Not done. Not yet. Claire burned it. Didn't tell anyone. Some things didn't belong in files or folders. Some truths had to be buried and watched. So that night and the one after and the one after that, she sat by the park bench with Milo, waiting. Because she understood now, this wasn't over. This was the rhythm. And maybe next fall, something else would come crawling out of the dirt. Or maybe it would just call another name. But she would be ready. Not as a deputy. Not even as protector. Just as someone who knew what the corn kept.